The ground trembled beneath the wheels of Emma's chair. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of tourists as they froze in place. 800 pounds of grizzly bear thundered across the open meadow of Yellowstone National Park, powerful muscles propelling it directly toward 12-year-old Emma Wilson, who sat helplessly in her wheelchair. Time seemed to slow as parents clutched their children. A park ranger reached for his bear spray, and Emma's father lunged forward only to realize he was too far away to reach his daughter in time. No one breathes. No one moves. No one can look away. The massive grizzly closes the distance with shocking speed, its eyes locked on the small figure in the wheelchair. Emma does not scream. She does not try to flee. Perhaps she knows it would be pointless. The bear charges relentlessly forward, closing the final yards between predator and what everyone assumes will be prey. This is the moment that will change everything. Not just for Emma and her family, but for how we understand one of nature's most feared and misunderstood creatures. The Wilsons had arrived at Yellowstone 3 days earlier, their minivan packed with the specialized equipment Emma needs since the car accident that paralyzed her lower body at age 7. This family vacation had been planned for years, with Emma's parents wanting to show their daughter the natural wonders they had fallen in love with during their honeymoon. Emma had spent months researching the wildlife she might encounter, her tablet filled with facts about wolves, moose, and bears. That Thursday morning began like any other day of their vacation. The familiar routine of helping Emma into her specially designed all-terrain wheelchair, packing lunches and checking the park map for accessible viewpoints. Park rangers had mentioned increased bear activity along the Lamar Valley trails, but assured visitors that maintaining proper distance would ensure safety. The Wilsons joined a small guided tour group, Emma positioned near the front with a clear view of the sprawling valley ahead. None of them could have anticipated what would happen when their group paused at a scenic overlook. Not the tour guide with 20 years of experience, not the wildlife photographer who had documented grizzly behavior for National Geographic, and certainly not Emma, whose bright eyes scanned the horizon with childlike wonder, unaware that in moments she would become part of an encounter that would defy everything experts thought they knew about grizzly bears. The morning sun illuminated the valley as the bear appeared from the tree line, and now as it charges with unstoppable force toward the girl in the wheelchair, everyone holds their breath, certain they are about to witness a tragedy. Emma Wilson had not always been in a wheelchair. For the first 7 years of her life, she had run through fields, climbed trees, and chased butterflies with the boundless energy of childhood. But a rainy night and a drunk driver changed everything in an instant. The accident that took her ability to walk also gave her something else, a new perspective on life and a deeper connection with the world around her. During the long months of recovery and physical therapy, Emma found comfort in nature documentaries. While other children her age lost themselves in cartoons and video games, Emma became fascinated by the complex lives of animals. Her hospital room transformed into a sanctuary of wildlife posters and stuffed animals. Nurses would often find her watching footage of lions on the African savanna or whales breaching in Arctic waters, her eyes wide with wonder even on the hardest days. When Emma finally returned home, her parents noticed something unusual. The neighborhood cats that normally avoided strangers would approach Emma's wheelchair without hesitation. Birds would perch unusually close when she sat in the backyard. Even the skittish deer that occasionally wandered into their suburban neighborhood seemed calm in her presence. Emma's mother, Sarah, first dismissed these occurrences as coincidence, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. At the local animal shelter where Emma volunteered, she became known as the animal whisperer. Dogs that snapped at other volunteers would gently lay their heads in her lap. Traumatized cats emerged from hiding when she spoke softly to them. The shelter manager, Ms. Reynolds, often commented that Emma had a gift, something beyond simple kindness. There seemed to be an unspoken understanding between the girl and the animals, a communication that transcended words. This gift both amazed and worried Emma's parents. While they encouraged her passion for wildlife, they also feared for her safety. Her father, Michael, had grown up in rural Montana and knew the unpredictable nature of wild animals. When Emma first expressed her dream to visit Yellowstone, her parents hesitated. Their concerns multiplied when they researched wheelchair-accessible trails and realized many would take them into areas populated by predators, including wolves and bears. But Emma persisted, assembling presentation boards full of statistics about animal behavior and the rarity of attacks on humans. She promised to follow every safety protocol. She reminded them of all the obstacles she had already overcome. And finally, seeing the determination in their daughter's eyes, they relented. The Yellowstone trip would happen, but with every possible precaution in place. None of them realized that Emma's mysterious connection with animals would soon be tested in the most extreme way possible, or that it would challenge scientific understanding about one of North America's most fearsome predators. The morning of their third day at Yellowstone broke with perfect clarity, the kind of crystal blue sky that photographers dream about, with air so fresh it seemed to awaken every sense. The Wilson family joined their tour group at 7:30, earlier than their previous excursions. Their guide, Tom Harrington, a weathered man with 30 years of experience in the park, explained that early mornings offered the best wildlife viewing opportunities. Their small group of 12 travelers followed the accessible Lamar Valley Trail, a path specifically chosen because it accommodated Emma's all-terrain wheelchair while still offering authentic wilderness experiences. Tom led them to a viewing area overlooking a vast meadow dotted with wildflowers and bisected by a lazy stream. Through binoculars, they spotted elk grazing in the distance and a bald eagle soaring overhead. No one expected to see a grizzly bear. August was typically not prime bear viewing season in this particular area of the park. The massive creatures usually stayed higher in the mountains during the late summer months, following the cooler temperatures. But nature follows its own rules, not human expectations. The first person to spot the bear was a teenage boy with a powerful zoom lens on his camera. His excited whisper spread through the group like electricity. Tom immediately called for silence and instructed everyone to maintain absolute stillness. Through binoculars, the group watched in awe as the grizzly ambled along the far edge of the meadow, approximately 400 yards away. It paused occasionally to dig for roots or investigate interesting scents. Tom quietly explained that the bear appeared to be a healthy adult male, probably about 5 years old based on its size. He reassured the group that the bear showed no signs of aggression and was maintaining a comfortable distance. This was exactly the kind of safe wildlife viewing experience the park hoped to provide. Several people took photos while others simply watched in wonder. For 20 minutes, the scene remained peaceful. The bear continued its solitary foraging, seemingly unaware or unconcerned about the humans observing from afar. Emma sat transfixed, her eyes never leaving the magnificent creature. While others in the group passed binoculars back and forth, Emma seemed content to watch the distant figure with her naked eye, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. And then, without warning, everything changed. The bear suddenly stopped its foraging and raised its massive head. Its nose twitched visibly, even at this distance, as it tested the air. Then, with deliberate purpose, it turned and looked directly toward the observation area. More specifically, it looked at Emma. Tom later swore he had never seen anything like it in 3 decades of wildlife observation. The bear did not simply glance in their general direction. It locked its gaze on the girl in the wheelchair with an intensity that sent a chill through every witness. And then, defying all expected behavior, it began moving toward them. Time seemed to compress into heartbeats. One moment the bear stood at the distant edge of the meadow. The next it moved with shocking purpose directly toward the observation area. Not with the casual meander of a curious animal, but with the determined gait of a predator that has selected its target. Tom Harrington recognized the change immediately. 29 years as a Yellowstone guide had taught him to read animal behavior like others read books. The grizzly's body language had shifted from peaceful foraging to intense focus in an instant. "Everyone back up slowly toward the trailhead," Tom instructed, his voice calm but firm. "No sudden movements. Stay together." The group began retreating in near-perfect unison, parents pulling children close, couples linking hands. All except Emma, whose all-terrain wheelchair had become momentarily stuck in a small depression on the viewing platform. Michael Wilson moved toward his daughter, but found himself blocked by other retreating visitors. Those precious seconds of separation would soon feel like an eternity. The bear increased its pace. 400 yards became 300 with alarming speed. Its powerful shoulders rolled with each stride, massive paws eating up the distance between predator and prey. There was no mistaking its intent now. The bear was charging directly toward Emma. "Bear spray," Tom called out, reaching for the canister on his belt. Two other experienced hikers in the group did the same, but all three knew the devastating truth. Bear spray, while effective, only works at close range, typically 30 feet or less. The grizzly was still too far away and moving too quickly for the spray to be deployed effectively. Sarah Wilson screamed her daughter's name. The sound cut through the tension, causing several birds to take flight from nearby trees. Michael finally broke through the group, lunging toward Emma's wheelchair, desperate to pull her to safety. But even as he reached for the handles, he knew with sickening certainty that he could not move her quickly enough to escape the charging bear. Emma herself remained strangely calm. While panic erupted around her, the 12-year-old sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on the approaching predator. Her hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair, not in terror, but almost in anticipation. Later, witnesses would describe her expression not as fearful, but as intensely focused. 200 yards. The bear had covered half the distance in mere seconds, moving with the surprising speed that grizzlies can achieve despite their bulky appearance. Up to 35 miles per hour when charging, Tom had often told tour groups, faster than any human can run, and now that academic fact was becoming a terrifying reality. A wildlife photographer in the group later estimated that only 47 seconds passed from the moment the bear began its charge until it reached Emma. 47 seconds that stretched like hours in the minds of everyone present. 47 seconds during which adults found themselves paralyzed by a combination of fear and helplessness. 100 yards. Close enough now that everyone could see the ripple of muscle beneath thick fur. The massive head with small eyes fixed intently on the girl in the wheelchair. Close enough to see the gleam of sunlight on curved claws designed by nature to rip and tear. Close enough that several people began to turn away, unable to watch what seemed inevitable. The park ranger who had been stationed at the far end of the trail came running toward the commotion, radio in one hand, bear spray in the other. But he too was too far away to intervene in time. 50 yards. The ground literally trembled with each impact of the bear's paws. Michael had reached Emma's wheelchair, but found himself unable to dislodge it from where it had become stuck. In desperation, he positioned himself in front of his daughter, a human shield against the approaching threat. 20 yards, close enough to hear the bear's heavy breathing, close enough for death to feel certain. 10 feet, close enough to smell the wild musk of the grizzly, close enough to see individual hairs in its thick coat. Michael Wilson stood trembling, but resolute in front of his daughter, knowing his protection would likely prove futile against 800 pounds of apex predator. Behind him, Emma remained eerily calm, her eyes never leaving the bear. 5 feet, the moment when everything should have turned tragic. But then the unthinkable happened. The bear slowed. Its headlong charge transformed into a more measured approach. The aggression that had been evident in every powerful stride seemed to drain away, replaced by something no one could have predicted. Curiosity. 3 feet from Emma, the massive grizzly stopped completely. Its small eyes, intelligent and assessing, studied the girl in the wheelchair. The bear lowered its head, nose working overtime to process her scent. Every wildlife expert would later agree that this moment defied all known behavioral patterns. A charging grizzly does not simply stop unless deterred by injury or threat. "Do not move," Tom whispered to Michael, who stood frozen between his daughter and the bear. Any sudden movement now could trigger aggression. What happened next left every witness questioning their own eyes. The grizzly bear slowly, deliberately moved around Michael as if he were nothing more than an inconvenient tree in its path. Not with aggression or threat, but with what could only be described as polite dismissal. Its focus remained entirely on Emma. When the massive predator stood directly in front of Emma's wheelchair, close enough that its breath stirred her hair, several people closed their eyes, unable to watch what seemed certain to follow. Sarah Wilson later admitted she began praying, believing these were her daughter's final moments. Instead, with a gentleness that seemed impossible from such a powerful creature, the grizzly lowered itself until it sat on its haunches before Emma. The position was almost respectful, like a subject before royalty. The bear tilted its head, studying the girl with evident fascination. Emma, still showing no fear, slowly raised her hand. Several people gasped. Tom the guide later said his heart nearly stopped, but something told him not to interfere with whatever extraordinary connection was forming before their eyes. The grizzly leaned forward and sniffed Emma's outstretched fingers. Then, in a gesture that would eventually be analyzed by wildlife behaviorists across the globe, it delicately pressed its massive muzzle against her palm. The contact was gentle, almost reverent. Emma smiled, not the terrified grimace of someone facing death, but a genuine expression of joy and understanding. For nearly 3 minutes, an eternity in such circumstances, girl and bear remained in this tableau. The grizzly occasionally made soft huffing sounds that bear experts would later identify as non-threatening communication signals, typically reserved for cubs or mates. Sounds that a wild grizzly should never direct toward a human. When a slight breeze stirred the meadow grass, bringing new scents, the bear's attention briefly shifted. It raised its massive head, testing the air. Then, in a display that defied explanation, it moved to position itself between Emma and the direction of the new scent. Its posture shifted subtly, becoming more protective. "It's guarding her," whispered the wildlife photographer, his camera capturing images that would soon circulate worldwide. "The bear is actually protecting her from potential threats." No one moved. No one spoke above a whisper. They were witnessing something unprecedented in recorded human interaction with wild grizzlies. The bear, one of nature's most fearsome predators, had not only chosen to spare Emma, but appeared to have appointed itself her guardian. When a distant wolf howl echoed across the valley, the bear rose to its full height, standing on hind legs before Emma's wheelchair. Not in threat, but in vigilance, looking out across the landscape as if assessing dangers that might approach. When it dropped back to all fours, it made a soft woofing sound directly to Emma. And Emma, in violation of everything wildlife experts recommend, spoke back. Her words were too soft for most to hear, but those closest would later report she said simply, "I understand. Thank you." The grizzly gently bumped its nose against her knee, then turned and began walking away. Not in fear or hurry, but with the relaxed gait of an animal comfortable in its surroundings. At the edge of the clearing, it paused to look back once at Emma, as if checking that she remained safe, before disappearing into the tree line. For several long moments after the bear disappeared into the tree line, no one moved. The entire group stood frozen in a collective state of disbelief, as if breaking the silence might somehow shatter the impossible reality of what they had just witnessed. Several people were openly weeping. Others appeared to be in shock, their expressions vacant as their minds struggled to process an event that contradicted everything they had been taught about wild predators. Tom Harrington, the veteran guide, was the first to speak. His voice trembled slightly, betraying how deeply shaken he was beneath his professional exterior. "In 29 years, I have never," he began, then stopped, unable to find words adequate to describe what had transpired. Later in his official report, he would simply write, "The encounter defied all known behavioral patterns for wild grizzly bears." Michael Wilson knelt beside Emma's wheelchair, his hands shaking as he checked his daughter for any signs of injury or distress. Finding none, he wrapped his arms around her, his body still positioned protectively between her and the direction where the bear had disappeared. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Emma nodded, her expression serene. Unlike everyone around her, she showed no signs of shock or fear. If anything, she appeared energized by the encounter, her eyes bright with what could only be described as understanding. "He was just curious about me," she said simply. "He would never hurt me." The certainty in her voice caused several nearby witnesses to exchange glances. How could she possibly know that? How could anyone have predicted the bear's gentle behavior? Park rangers arrived in force within 15 minutes of the encounter, having been radioed by the Lone Ranger who had witnessed the event from a distance. They approached cautiously, rifles ready, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of the bear's return. Their pragmatic caution stood in stark contrast to Emma's continued calm. While rangers established a protective perimeter and began questioning witnesses, she sat quietly, occasionally glancing toward the spot where the bear had disappeared, with what looked strangely like longing. Senior Park Ranger Melissa Blackwood took charge of the scene, her 20 years of experience evident in her efficient management of what she initially assumed was a traumatic incident. But as witness after witness described what had actually occurred, her professional demeanor gave way to undisguised amazement. "You're saying the bear approached the child but made no aggressive move?" she clarified for the third time, struggling to believe the consistent accounts. "It was more than that," the wildlife photographer insisted, showing her the images on his camera. "The bear protected her. Look at its posture here when it heard the wolf howl. That's a defensive stance. It was guarding her." As rangers debated their next steps, something unexpected happened. The bear reappeared at the edge of the meadow, far enough away to be a dark silhouette against the trees, but unmistakably the same animal. Rather than causing panic, its presence created a strange hush among the group. The bear made no move to approach, but simply stood watching, as if monitoring the situation. Most remarkable of all was Emma's reaction. When others pointed out the bear's return, she simply nodded as if she had expected it. She raised her hand slightly in what appeared to be a gesture of acknowledgement. And although no one could explain how or why, many would later swear that the bear nodded in return before melting back into the forest. News of the extraordinary encounter spread through scientific circles with unprecedented speed. Within 48 hours, the first wildlife experts arrived at Yellowstone, drawn by reports and photographs that challenged fundamental understandings of predator behavior. Dr. Eleanor Nichols, a leading authority on North American bear behavior from the University of Montana, led the investigation, bringing with her a team of specialists in animal cognition, olfactory communication, and predator psychology. The meadow where the encounter occurred became a temporary research station. Scientists collected soil samples, air quality readings, and even electromagnetic field measurements in a desperate attempt to find some environmental factor that might explain the grizzly's behavior. They interviewed every witness multiple times, comparing accounts and searching for inconsistencies or explanations. They studied the photographs and video footage frame by frame, analyzing the bear's posture, eye direction, and minute behavioral cues. After a week of intensive study, Dr. Nichols called a press conference at park headquarters. Journalists from around the world packed the small conference room, cameras flashing as the distinguished scientist approached the podium. The scientific community expected a rational explanation that would preserve their understanding of wild predator behavior. What they received instead was a profound admission of uncertainty. "What we witnessed here defies current scientific understanding," Dr. Nichols stated, her academic caution evident in every carefully chosen word. "The behavior displayed by this grizzly bear has no precedent in recorded scientific literature. Wild grizzlies do not behave protectively toward humans. They do not display guarding behavior toward species outside their own, and they certainly do not interrupt a predatory charge to engage in peaceful interaction." Her team proposed several theories, none entirely satisfactory. One suggestion involved unusual hormone levels in the bear, potentially triggering parental protective instincts. Another proposed that the bear might have been previously habituated to humans, perhaps raised in captivity and released, though no records of such a bear existed in the region. A third, more controversial theory suggested that Emma herself might have been producing unusual pheromones or biochemical signals that triggered non-aggressive responses in the animal. Dr. Marcus Whitman, a controversial figure in wildlife biology, known for exploring unconventional theories, proposed something even more radical. He suggested the possibility of emotional intelligence in bears far beyond what science had previously acknowledged, including the capacity to recognize and respond to vulnerability or special qualities in other species. "We know that certain humans demonstrate unusual connections with animals," Dr. Whitman explained in a subsequent interview. "Animal trainers, horse whisperers, individuals with innate understanding of non-human behavior. What if certain animals possess similar capabilities? What if this particular bear somehow recognized something special about this child? Something we humans, for all our supposed superiority, failed to perceive?" His colleagues largely dismissed these suggestions as unscientific speculation. Yet in private conversations, many admitted that no conventional explanation adequately addressed what had happened that day in Yellowstone. In the weeks following the encounter, more details emerged about Emma's history with animals. Her parents shared stories they had previously dismissed as coincidence. how injured birds would land near her wheelchair in the park, how the therapy horses at her rehabilitation center would specifically seek her out, how the family dog had woken them the night before Emma's first seizure, leading them to her room moments before it began. Emma's physical therapist revealed that therapy animals responded to her in ways unlike any other patient. Her elementary school teacher confirmed that classroom pets showed unusual behavior in her presence. These incidents, individually unremarkable, formed a pattern that could no longer be ignored after the Grizzly encounter. Emma herself spoke little about her connection with animals. When pressed, she would simply say, "I listened to them, and they listened to me." This simplicity belied what many now believed was an extraordinary ability to communicate with animals on a level science couldn't yet explain. The encounter transformed Yellowstone's approach to wildlife management. New research programs studied emotional intelligence in large predators. Rangers incorporated Emma's experience into safety briefings, not as a suggestion that bears were less dangerous, but as evidence that wildlife behavior remained profoundly mysterious. Conservation efforts received unexpected support as Emma's story spread. People who had viewed predators purely as threats began seeing them as complex beings, capable of discernment and even compassion. Donations to wildlife protection programs surged worldwide. Emma herself became an unlikely ambassador for conservation. Speaking at schools and environmental events, she shared a message both simple and profound. Animals understand more than we think. We should try to understand them too. The medical community also took interest, with neurologists studying whether Emma's brain injury from the accident had somehow rewired her sensory perception. While they found no conclusive evidence, many researchers became convinced that human-animal communication held secrets yet to be discovered. What made the bear encounter so extraordinary wasn't just the behavior of the grizzly, but what it revealed about the potential relationships between species long considered incompatible. Emma and the bear had momentarily bridged a divide thought unbridgeable, leaving everyone who witnessed or heard about it questioning the limits of what might be possible. If you found Emma's incredible story fascinating, there are many more amazing animal encounters waiting for you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily videos showcasing extraordinary wildlife moments that will leave you speechless. Click the subscribe button below to join our community of nature enthusiasts and never miss another incredible story. Nature always surprises us. Be there when it happens.